In the summer of 1939, I had my 8th birthday. I lived with my parents in North Uxbridge, and for the previous 3 years I had been attending the Belmont Road Infants School. But there was no junior school in our part of the town, so I knew that in the autumn term I would be moving to Whitehall School. In the late 1930s, the question on everybody's mind was, will we again be at war with Germany? Under Nazi control, that country was again showing signs of expanding its borders. Our government had taken some measures to protect the civil population. An Air Raid Precaution Service, ARP, had been established to control things. For example, gas masks were issued to everybody in September 1938. Steel air raid shelters became available with instructions on how to install them in one's garden. They were sometimes called Anderson shelters. Air raid sirens had been fitted, notably one on the roof of the police station in Winter Street. But was war inevitable? On the 29th of August, I became a pupil at Whitehall School, and for 4 days we settled into the new term. But at the weekend, events took a dramatic turn. Hitler broke his promise not to invade Poland, and so on the Sunday morning came the famous broadcast from Downing Street. This country is at war with Germany. A national emergency was declared, and that included the immediate closure of all schools. I'm now going to relate events at Whitehall School, but I must tell you that I've been able to confirm my memories of those days. As a trusted local historian, I have been able to read the school logbook and read the daily entries made at the time by Headmaster Charles Pentney. Of course, the main problem was that there were no air raid shelters, and without them, normal school was impossible. The fact that there were no air raids at the time didn't matter. There might be. It was in October, actually, that classes began in rooms in the infant building, rooms that were regarded as safe. And so my parents received a letter to say that I should attend school on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and alternate Fridays for 2 hours. Homework would be set each time. And this arrangement really continued for the rest of the term. And at last, in December, large concrete pipes that formed the basis of these shelters were delivered, and work began on installing them in the ground at the back of the school. So in January 1940, normal classes in the buildings resumed. But now there was also air raid drill. The headmaster called it trench drill, perhaps from his days in the army, I don't know. Anyhow, how long would it take everybody to get from the classroom to the shelter? And the answer proved to be about 3 or 4 minutes. Air raids really began in August 1940, some at night. So the order came through that if our sleep was affected between midnight and 6 a.m., school the next morning would begin at 10:30. In September, the air raids intensified, with sirens sounding more than once a day as well as night. On September the 6th, Mr. Pentney wrote, The total time in the shelters this week was 5 hours 38 minutes. On the 25th of October, he recorded, "School began at 10:35 and there was another alarm from 2 until 3:45. Altogether, 10 hours 25 minutes lost in the shelters this week." There was little chance to carry on any useful activity in those shelters. But now, of course, this was the Blitz, or the Battle of Britain. Day after day, night after night, the air raids continued. And in October, one of the boys at Whitehall School was killed when a bomb destroyed his house in Rockingham Parade. Mr. Pentney and 6 of his friends attended the funeral. In January 1941, the number of air raids began to decrease, with only 4 in the entire month. And in February, there were none at all. And so the Battle of Britain was won. Hitler had failed to invade this country and had unwisely turned his attention to invading Russia. In April 1941, an ARP lorry entered the Whitehall playground, pulling a small trailer, which was, in effect, just an empty room. We children were ushered into this cabin in groups, and then the doors were shut, and we were told to put our gas masks on. There followed a talk on the importance of looking after your mask, after which we were instructed to take the masks off. But what a shock! Our eyes were streaming with tears, and we began coughing and spluttering because while the doors had been shut, they had fed tear gas into the little cabin. The doors were hastily opened, and we all rushed out into the fresh air. Within a few minutes, we were all back to normal. But that tear gas was indeed a great shock. That's the only dose I've ever had, and it was unforgettable. But it did convince us that gas masks actually worked and should be looked after with care. But of course, as you know, in the end, gas wasn't used in the war at all. February 1942 saw the introduction of school dinners. There was no kitchen at Whitehall, but there was one in a building where the Salvation Army meet today. Well, I lived in North Uxbridge, which was some distance from the school, so I joined the school dinner scheme. And I was by this time a prefect, so I was sometimes at the front of the crocodile of children, wending their way along Cowley Road for lunch. My time at Whitehall was now drawing to a close, and transfer to secondary school would come in the summer. It had been one of the worst times to be at school, with danger and death threatening, but we had survived to tell the story of those challenging and eventful days. You may not have gone to Whitehall School, but I hope my experience there has helped some of you to remember the events at your own school in those difficult times.